Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Cordam and in this video I will be giving my review for Baldur's Gate 3. So I want to start off by saying that this review is being done after some time has passed after finishing my first playthrough, okay? So the playthrough that I uploaded to my channel is my first playthrough, a completely blind playthrough, and even though this video will very likely be published the day after the final episode of the playthrough, just know that some time has passed between this review and finishing that playthrough. This was intentional. At the time I thought, okay, I might as well just do the review right now while the entire game is fresh on my mind, but I felt like I would probably not be giving a very accurate review of the game due to being, in the honeymoon period for Baldur's Gate 3. For someone not familiar with the expression, the honeymoon period, it basically just means that it's that time where there's a lot of hype for the game, where you're very excited about the game. For example, I was playing with Will, and I was constantly thinking, oh, what if I was playing with a different character, or if I was playing as an evil character? What does the evil choice look like? What would happen here if I was playing with a paladin or a bard instead of a warlock? So I basically, as soon as I finished the game, I wanted to start 20 other playthroughs to explore different aspects, different things to do, and I was just very, very hyped for the game and very excited. And I think that would probably lead to a bit of a biased review and also not very accurate. So some time has passed, and in that time I explored other aspects of the game. So I explored the evil path of a playthrough, I explored a neutral path of the playthrough, I've explored playing the game just for the combat encounters and completely skipping all of the dialogue just to check out different classes, interactions and whatnot, mostly gameplay wise, not really so much interested in the plot or the story, and I've even played a little bit on multiplayer with a friend of mine. So I come to this point where I'm doing this review where I feel that I have a lot more knowledge about the game than I had when I finished my first playthrough. So I think it's going to be a better and more informed review for anybody interested. Now, naturally, I don't know 100% of this game. There's surely many things that I missed, and that's actually one of the good things about the game, is that there's just so much. There are so many different choices, different interactions. Especially different interactions which are specific to the character and class that you are playing. So you may go about the game playing as Will, as a good person, as a warlock, and then you start up a playthrough playing with a different origin or just a different class, and you're not gonna get a new game entirely, but you will certainly notice differences in various dialogues where you are going to have specific conversations due to the class you are playing or the character you are playing. And I think that's interesting. So I think that for anyone to have 100% knowledge about the game, they would have to play with every single character, with every single class, as good, neutral, and evil, to really, uncover every single thing the game has to offer. With that out of the way, so let's go about what I think of this game. I think at this point enough time has passed since the full release that there is already a lot of content publicly about Baldur's Gate 3. A lot of streamers, YouTubers, and a lot of different people have played this game and reviewed it. And I believe that most of the consensus is that this is a really cool game. It was a huge success, a lot of people played it, and a lot of people liked it. And I'm not going to contest that. I do think that Baldur's Gate 3 is a really good game. I think it was a very big hit in the world of video games and for Larian and whatnot. Especially because this is a game that it was not only played by people who had played the originals. This wasn't a game that was only played by CRPG enthusiasts. Now, naturally, there's a lot of marketing behind this, and well, you can say they did a good job. Because you had people from all different backgrounds coming to play the game, and they liked it. I had people coming to play the game with a very deep knowledge of the Dungeons and Dragons rule set, the Dungeons and Dragons system, and I had other people playing the game, friends of mine that had never played Dungeons and Dragons in their lives. They didn't know that the game was based on dice rolls or whatnot, or whatever. And they still enjoyed it a lot. And I think that that's a very big success. I think that's a very good thing for a game like this. I think there's also something to say here and to recognize, as in, it's not every day that a game with this amount of content and this amount of depth comes out, right? It's rare nowadays for a game like this to come out. And that's also a very, very good thing. I think Larry did a very good job with this. I would probably say that I imagine that the people who disliked Baldur's Gate 3 the most are very likely the people who loved Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2 and came into this one with the expectation that it would be kind of like a spiritual successor or similar in gameplay or whatnot, and it's just not, right? So the game plays very differently, the game takes place a long time after the originals, so if you're coming to play this game expecting Baldur's Gate 1 or Baldur's Gate 2, you may be disappointed. So I would imagine that most people that dislike the game are probably in this group. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong, this is just a matter of expectations and the style of game and gameplay that you like, okay? So me coming from a background of loving the originals, they are my favorite games of all time, Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2. Sure, I was kind of sad and upset and a lot of different feelings at the time when Baldur's Gate 3 was announced and I get to see how Baldur's Gate 3 was. You know, the whole style of the game, the characters, the companions, the origin stories, the whole turn-based versus real-time with pause. And there was a time where I was kind of upset with this, and I still think it's not entirely right. Well, it's very subjective, okay? But to me, personally, I still don't think that this game should have been called Baldur's Gate 3. Because to my mind, it implies some kind of relation with the originals in a much stronger way than what was done here. But again, that's my take on it. It doesn't mean that it has to be the right one or the wrong one. I do feel, though, that this game, as a standalone game, is a very good game. It's a very good RPG. It's very interesting, very compelling, very engaging. There's always a lot of stuff to do. So, big success, generally speaking. I think that this game has a very interesting story. I think that the story is interesting and compelling from start to finish. I didn't really get to a point where I felt that the story was getting stale or uninteresting. No, there was always something happening. You were always discovering something else about your condition, what's going on with the world, the entire conspiracy and the plot of the chosen of the tree and whatnot, and the elder brain, plus the emperor, plus, you know, demons and devils. There was always something new and cool happening as you progress through the story. And I think that's a very good thing for a story-driven game. So the story, I think, was really well done. I think that the game does suffer a little bit from pacing issues. And this is probably because, you know, when the game was in early access, the entire Act 1 was available to players. So that Act 1 was very noticeably more polished and, you know, better rounded than the others. So Act 1 felt like it had a lot of content, a lot of cool things to do, but they were all well spread out. You know, you had specific reasons and motivations to go to a specific place or do certain things or explore certain areas, and it all connected very, very well, be it by playing as a good character or as an evil character. I do feel that once you finish Act 1 and you enter Act 2, you start noticing some cracks. So I think that Act 2, for instance, is a very cool looking act. I think that the theme of the act is excellent, that whole darkness of the Shadowlands with the creepiness of the Thorms. I think that it was really, really engaging in that sense, and you know, it felt different, but it felt very, very good exploring that whole thing of the Thorm family, and you know, I don't know what to say. The whole Act 2, Ketheric Thorm, his sons, the Mind Flayer colony, the Shadowlands. There was a lot of cool things, but I also feel that a lot of the Act 2 was kind of empty. There was a lot of the Shadowlands where you just kind of roam around and you fight plant monsters just because they're just there. Like, it's just a random enemy that you kill for some reason. And you're just exploring for exploration's sake. Exploration is cool, but, you know, compared with the first act, for instance, where you felt like every single area of the game had a reason to be there, and the things, the monsters, the people you fought had a purpose or a reason for being there, in Act 2, there's a lot of just, you know, generic, here you go, some enemies, kill them, and go on. And in Act 3, on the other hand, or as an opposite to Act 2, I think that the problem of Act 3 is that it's very, very, very overwhelming. So when you reach Act 3, especially when you enter Baldur's Gate City, there's just so much. There are so many people, so many houses, so many points of interest. And usually, having a lot of stuff to do is good, but I think it needed to be spread out a little bit more. Because there's a lot of really cool quests and really cool people to meet in Baldur's Gate, but it's all like a mishmash in the same place. So I feel like that part didn't really work out very well, because I think the player can reach that area and very easily become overwhelmed or lost, or maybe even just bored of all the things that happen there. My experience, for example, was I really wanted to reach Baldur's Gate because I wanted to see how Baldur's Gate played out, and I kind of got a little bit frustrated, or even a little bit bored, just trying to speak with people. Because again, if we think back to the Act 1 or to Act 2, most of the people you find, you know, most of the NPCs, they have a purpose, they have something to tell you, they have a quest or whatnot. In Act 3, you have just a lot of generic people around the world. Some of them may give you a quest, some others may not, and it got to a point where I was tired of exploring that area. So I think it worked a little bit against them, the whole thing of, yeah, Baldur's Gate has a lot of people and a lot of places and whatnot. But yeah, I think there were some pacing issues there. The same thing for, you know, performance and bugs with the game. You know, having played right at the release, naturally there have been numerous patches over time. But you could clearly see that Act 1 had very few or no bugs at all. Once you got into Act 2, you started seeing a lot more bugs, and when you got to Act 3, oh my god, man, there were bugs all over the place. Like sequencing bugs, characters bugging out, game crashing, quests not working as intended, even resting broke my game at certain points. So it definitely felt like the game needed some more testing for those final areas. So yeah, that's basically what I feel about the story and the pacing of the game. I think it's very interesting, the story, it's very engaging, it's always fresh. Every step of the way, there was something that made me think, am I doing the right choice or not? Should I trust this guy? Should I trust the other guy? Is this the right way? Is it not? And I think that's interesting for the player. It's not just, you know, move forward and this is the path and do whatever. I think it's cool that the game kept me on edge, trying to always make sure if I'm making the right choice or not. Other than that, in terms of, for example, difficulty, I think that, first of all, so I've always played the game in the highest difficulty available, which is Tactician. There's no real other choices to take in terms of difficulty for the game. And I do feel that, you know, for the average player, I think it's a pretty decent difficulty level for the average player. You know, I know that some players, like maybe me, are coming here like, oh, I want to play Baldur's Gate 3 because I love the system and I know all the spells and the interactions and how everything works and I want to see how this plays out. Yeah, so for someone like that, the difficulty probably seems a little bit underwhelming. But, you know, for the regular player that just wants to come here and play the game and have fun, I do think the Tactician will likely give them an appropriate challenge. It's going to challenge them in certain fights to keep the game engaging, but at the same time, it's not going to be I'm just watching Scratch, sorry. It's not going to be like a punishingly unfair experience where the player just gets frustrated and gives up. So, as an example, and this is also because I've been playing it, it's probably my next project for the channel, I've been playing Pathfinder. So if you know Pathfinder Kingmaker and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, those games have multiple difficulty settings, and if you tune them to the highest one, you will suffer, especially if you don't know the game very well. If you don't have a lot of game knowledge and system knowledge, you are going to suffer, and you are going to get frustrated, and you are going to quit the games thinking they suck. So yeah, I think that in that one, the difficulty goes it goes way overboard for the average player, but it can be cool for the very knowledgeable player. While Baldur's Gate 3, I think it has a very cool set of different difficulties for more average players, more casual players. At the same time, it might be a little bit too easy for, you know, people that have more experience with CRPGs or Dungeons & Dragons and whatnot. So, as an example, my entire playthrough is in the channel, and it was essentially an Iron Man playthrough. We never died in combat. I think I died once because I killed the Emperor when I shouldn't have. But gameplay-wise, in terms of combat encounters, there's not really that much of a challenge, especially once you reach a certain level or once you start getting some items. You essentially have to make an effort to die, is what I felt. It didn't remove the enjoyment of the fights, but it's very clear that on certain fights, the game being so easy works against it. Something that very quickly comes to my mind is the fight in the... Oh god, what's the name? Do I have the quest here? Where is it? No, it's related to Gortash in the factory. Yeah, whatever. I think you guys get the point. You don't have to suffer through me looking at the quest here. But the quest to go into the factory where they create the robots, you have a final boss there, right? You have that big tank-looking construct. And I was expecting a difficult fight. It's a boss fight after all. And that fight was summed up by casting Hold Monster. The boss got paralyzed and he died in one turn. He didn't even act once. To this day, I don't know what that boss does, because I've always killed him like that. I don't know what he casts, I don't know if he shoots or if he melees. I have no idea what that boss does because he's never moved in my game. As another example, Raphael. Raphael, I think, is like a god tier fight in terms of, you know, the entire game. It's really, really cool and probably my favorite level scenario fight in the entire game is Raphael, with the whole music and whatnot. But, for example, right now, I know that if I go and play against Raphael, I can cast Hold Monster, and he dies. I think there was a patch recently to improve his will score, or his wisdom score, but still, like, in my playthrough, it's like, cast this, he dies, and that's over. That's not very engaging, let's say. I also think that certain fights being gimmicky, and this brings me back to the Act 1 boss, the Titan in the Forge. I think that gimmicky fights are really cool for a first playthrough, but very uninteresting for future playthroughs. Because right now I know that if I'm playing Act 1 and if I reach the Forge, I know that I will not have any kind of challenge in that fight, because the fight is just a gimmick. You just follow the recipe and the guy is dead. And even if I don't do the gimmick, the game is so easy you can just beat him with a hammer and he dies, and it's not really a challenge. But yeah, so personally, I do wish that the game was a little bit more or a lot more difficult, or just had, you know, a different setting of difficulty for people who want the game to be more difficult. I know that a lot of mods have been coming up, but the ones I saw were mostly just increasing HP of enemies and taking more damage. That's not really the kind of difficulty that I like. I would like that the AI would be more intelligent, and something that always bothered me while playing this game, and this may relate back to my experience with Baldur's Gate 2 and Baldur's Gate 1, is that every time I come up against a spellcaster enemy, my body is like, this is danger. Again, because in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, that's the danger of the game. And in this one, there were numerous occasions where I was fighting against spellcaster enemies at my level or higher level, and they spent their turns casting cantrips. That's insane to me. That makes no sense. I would expect them to use the same spells that I use. I would expect them to make the fight difficult. So, when you have enemy spellcasters that basically don't cast anything dangerous, plus the fact that there is the concentration mechanic involved, plus the fact that counterspell exists, it trivializes a lot of spellcaster fights, and that's not cool to me. Because for me, the coolest thing about Dungeons and Dragons, and especially Baldur's Gate, again, this may be just coming back to the originals, was always the magic systems and playing, you know, mage versus mage. It was really cool. And here, not that much. So yeah, I would like the difficulty to be a little bit better. I would like the AI of the game to be much, much smarter. What else do we have? I guess we can talk about the companions. So I would say, first of all, that if you like to have companions that have epic stories and, you know, just something, just a story, background story that takes you from the start of the game to the end of the game, and they always have quests and something coming up, I think Baldur's Gate 3 does that quite well. We have here my lover, Lae'zel, for example. This lady has a quest from, you know, from day one up to the end. It's a very epic quest. She connects with her pseudo-goddess. If you look at Shadowheart,
can't afford to stay idle.
She also is like in a struggle between two goddesses. If you look at Gale, he was actually in bed with the goddess of magic. So if you like very, very epic quests, these characters will have it for you. At the same time, at least to me, it seems a little bit too much. Like, you meet a couple of random people on a on a random beach in the world, and all of them have direct connections to gods. It seems a little bit strange. I mean, it has to be that way because they are playable characters and you get to play their origin story. But it does feel a little bit weird when you are playing with them as companions that every single person, you know, is like is like a god, essentially. I think it's a bit too much. I also think, and again, going back to companions, something that I was concerned about when the game was getting released was the amount of companions in the game. So I feared for that because the only companions I had seen were Gale, Shadowheart, Lae'zel, and Astarion. I believe, oh, and Will, of course, and Will. I think those were the only ones that were available at the time when I played. Eventually, they also added Karlach, so cool, you have another one. But when I was gonna play the game and when I did some reviews for the early access, a lot of people were saying, don't worry about that, that's not an issue, because the game has a lot more companions. You get to have Minsk in your party, you get to have Jaheira in your party, you have the druid Halsin, you have the drow Minthara. And I was like, okay, so wait, so there's a bunch more companions. And then the fact that you can respec every single companion to whatever you like, it also gives you a lot of choice. So at the time, I was like, okay, maybe I'm wrong, maybe there are more companions to this, and there's a lot more versatility. But the reality is not quite like that, at least in my opinion, because you spend the entire first act and the only companions available to you were the ones I mentioned initially. So Will, Gale, Shadowheart, Lae'zel, Astarion, and Karlach. You have no more than this. And even though there may be the argument that, okay, there will be some more companions down the line, that's not quite right. Okay, that's not very... I'm missing the word here. There's a good word for what I mean to say. But that's not exactly true. Because, sure, you can play with Minsk. But when do you get Minsk? You get Minsk, like, somewhere in Act 3. The game is almost over. So, that's, to me, you can't say that the game has a lot of companions because Minsk exists, because to me that doesn't even count. And yeah, he's in the game, you can play with him, sure, but at least to me, if I start playing a game like this, and I assemble a party, and I have a party that I like, for example, okay, I have my warlock, I have my mage, I have my cleric, I have my fighter rogue stuff-ish, I'm not going to be playing the game and then 60 hours in, a new companion shows up and I'm like, okay, so this guy exists, I'm just gonna ditch Lae'zel and bring in Minsk. That doesn't work for me. Okay, that's not valid to me. For me to consider Minsk as a companion, or to consider playing with Minsk, he would have to be available early on, that I would be able to assemble my initial party with him in the party. Because other than that, I'm very likely never going to take him. And the same thing applies to Jaheira. You get Jaheira at the end of Act 2. Again, that's way too late. Halsin, you get near the ending of Act 2. Minthara you can get a little bit earlier than Halsin, but there are other issues with that. So when I was playing my evil playthrough, I was like, oh, I really want to play with Minthara, she looks like a cool character, so I want to see how she plays. And I basically beelined to get her. So essentially, I finished Act 1, I killed the Druid Grove, I went to Act 2, I went straight to the Moonrise Towers and rescued her. What's the problem here? I beeline to get her, because again, my issue with this is I want to have companions available as early as possible. So, once I got her, I thought, okay, now that I have Minthara, I'm going to explore the game world with her as my companion. I want to see her interactions. I want to see how she performs in different fights. Okay, so where am I gonna start? I guess I'll start at the mountain pass. And I'll go and check out the monastery with her in my party. Guess what? You can't. if you try to go to any area that the game considers before or out of the Shadowlands, Minthara basically says, oh no, I can't go back there with you, so I'll just go to the camp and leave you. So, so even though you can recruit her a little bit earlier than the rest, she won't go with you to a lot of different places. She won't go with you to the monastery. If there is something you forgot or that you want to go check out back in the area of Act 1, like Underdark or whatever, that you can still access, she will not go with you either. So it's very, very annoying. And yeah, the number of companions I think is just very, very weak. Halsin, I never really played with him, to be honest, but I imagine it's gonna play the same style as Minthara. He will probably not go with you to areas outside of, you know, the Shadowlands in Act 2. And to me, that's kind of a shame. And we can also talk about the fact that you can respec your companions to whatever you may need. Sure, that's cool in terms of gameplay versatility, party composition. If I want a bard in my party, I can change Lae'zel to become a bard. And she will play as a bard, and she will play nicely as a bard, and you know, mechanically she will be a bard. Does it make sense with her personality though? No, it doesn't. If I make, I don't know, if I make Astarion a druid, does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. He will play, we will have a druid in the party, but it doesn't make sense. So I think that the game has very fleshed out companions with deep stories, that's a good thing, but if you try to do something different, if you want to have a different party, if you want to have some versatility, you are always stuck. And not only that, but if you play the game a second, third time, fourth time, whatever, you are always gonna be playing the entire first act and probably the entire second act with the same characters over and over and over again. And that gets a little bit tiring. So if I compare this with other games like the original Baldur's Gate, that's not an issue. You have a lot of different companions to choose from. And given that you can't respec them, sure, it's more strict, but they all keep their personalities. The aspect that makes a certain character valuable will always be present. If you want an excellent archer that takes care of thieving duties in Baldur's Gate 1, dude, you have Corran. Corran is the guy for you. If you want a really good priest or a cleric, you have Iconia. Or you have the lady at the carnival. If you want a nice tank, you have Kagan. Okay, maybe I'm just rambling on, but you have a lot of different choices, they all play their different roles, and you can play the game multiple times and have a different party every single time. And it's also cool, especially in Baldur's Gate 2, because of the way that the companions interact with one another. So, if you've played Baldur's Gate 3 once or twice, you have already seen all of the interactions. If I go to play Baldur's Gate 2 now, today, and I try out a different party composition, I'm still going to be seeing something fresh. And that's something that I think that this game does poorly. Very fleshed out companions, but very little choice. What else? Okay, so let's talk about the fact that this game is only turn-based. So I do think, I'm gonna start by saying that I think that the game is very well done in terms of the gameplay with a turn-based system. I think it was the better choice given the entire context. So naturally, someone that's played Baldur's Gate 1, Baldur's Gate 2 and they want a similar gameplay feel, they are not going to have it. The originals are real-time with pause only, this one is turn-based only. I've already said what I thought about that in my early access review. I won't go too much into the details of those, but just to say that, yeah, if you have an expectation of the originals here, gameplay-wise, it's not going to be the same thing. However, I do think that the turn-based system was nicely implemented in Baldur's Gate 3. And this is something that I had said from the beginning. I think that given the fact that this was a game being made by Larian, and given their background with other video games, I did feel like turn-based would be the better choice, because they had experience with it, and they had done very, very well with it in Divinity, Original Sin, and Original Sin 2. I think that if they would try to go for a real-time with pause approach, especially with the game that shares the same engine as the Divinity games, it would be a gigantic effort, and they would have a lot more room to mess up. So I do think that turn-based was well done here. I think it's still a fun gameplay, and I think that the encounters are mostly taking turn-based into consideration. So one of the things that I feared was there would be a lot of, you know, fodder fights with just packs of goblins or packs of animals or whatnot. And those, as an example, the goblin camp, if you decide to kill the goblin camp, you have to face like 20 or 30 goblins. That's very boring, because they don't really represent a danger to your party. They're very easy, but there are so many, and they all take a turn. It just takes too long, it's boring, it's too time consuming, and I don't like it. And I feared that could happen for a lot of the game. Thankfully, I think that the number of encounters where that happens is very, very low in the game. So it never really got to a point that I felt like, this is a slog of a fight, this is so annoying, this is horrible. I guess that the fight before Gortash had this feeling, where you have to kill the entire fortress is just boring as hell. It would have been a lot more fun in real time. But for the majority of the fights, I think that turn-based is very adequate, and it was always quite fun playing it. So, on that regard, I think that they did a good job, and the game doesn't have any problem by being turn-based. On the contrary, in fact. Other topics. I guess we can go back a little bit to... this might be related to difficulty or to companions, possibly. But I wanted to discuss a little bit respeccing. So, in the game, you can freely respec any of your characters at any given time. I do feel that for most players, this will be a gigantic advantage. Especially because, like I said, this game attracted a lot of different people. And a lot of those people had never played Baldur's Gate or Dungeons and Dragons before and don't really understand the system. And that's not unusual, that's just normal. People have to learn. And one of the most frustrating things that can happen to a player like that, while playing a game like this, is you are leveling up your character, right? And as you level up, you get to make different choices, right? You get to, for example, for the Warlock, you get to pick your pack. You get to pick your pact. You get to pick upgrades to, for example, Eldritch Blast. You get to pick if you want to increase your stats or if you want a passive ability. And you can also multi-class. So it's very easy for someone playing the game to make choices thinking that they are doing the right choice, and then the next level up comes up and they find something that they weren't expecting, and they will consider, oh, okay, so I just ruined my entire build. This is a waste of a character. I hate this. And by allowing the person to respec their characters, it basically solves the problem. Okay, so on the one hand, it's a very cool thing. On the other hand, I'm kind of against the fact that you can respec. So I'll explain a little bit better. I think that respec should not be allowed, for example, on certain difficulties. I think that if you are playing on Tactician, I think respec should be disabled. And why is that? Because the fact that respec is available means that you can play the game in a very weird way. Because you can min-max in a, to a stupid extent. Like, let's consider, I'm just throwing a random example here. Let's say that Fighter is the most powerful class for the very early game, but it's one of the weakest classes for the late game. Okay, again, random hypothetical example, not related to the game. What this means is, you could start the game, you could respec your entire party to have like all fighters, or like, I don't know, 3 fighters and a cleric, whatever you may want. And then let's also imagine that sorcerers or wizards become insanely powerful at level 6, but that they are very weak at level 1. This means that you could have a party of fighters up to level 6, and then you reach level 6 and you respec, and now you have a fighter and 3 sorcerers, for example. Okay, you can do this. If you really want to min-max, you could respec every single level for maximum efficiency. Now, who's gonna do this? I don't know, but it can be done. And it doesn't make a lot of sense role-playing wise, right? So, if you start off as a wizard, as a mage character, and then you respec and become a rogue, or a cleric, or a bard, or whatever, it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? The identity of the character is broken at those points. Maybe this is just like a minimal thing to me, but I feel like if you are playing on a lower difficulty, have respec available because of what I said. It's very easy for a new player to make mistakes without knowing and mess up an entire build, and respeccing will save that. I do feel like if you want to play the higher difficulties, you should have to make your build from level 1 up to the maximum level in a way that your character is competent from start to finish. Because otherwise I think it's a little bit strange the way that we can abuse this system, and I don't like it. Again, going back to companions. Sorry, I guess I'm starting to learn myself how important companions are in this kind of game just by doing this review, which is kind of interesting. Because a lot of my concerns and possible improvements are on that regard. So, one thing that I hate, and this one I can really say that I hate in the game, is that I cannot make a custom companion. I can recruit those I forget the name that they have on withers, and sure, you can respec them to something else, but you can't make a character from scratch. You can't name them. You can't choose the race or the look or whatever for your companion. You have to pick from a small preset of companions. Let me see if I can show this here. I wonder if they patched this out or if they added a new feature. I'm actually curious. I should have checked this before doing the review, but we're learning this live.
Time for a chat.
Because on withers, you can say that you want a hireling.
Impossible.
Oh god, yeah, okay. So, Gale, go away.
Orin was a...
No.
What's on your mind?
Okay, stay in the camp.
Question the wisdom of that decision, but I'll be here.
Okay. Oh my god, now he gave me his gear, so I'm encumbered. Cool. Just casually throw away 14k gold. Okay, so if we want to hire a hireling...
Very well. No. Thy coin purse.
Oh my... Yeah, I'm dumb. This is my fault. Where are the... Sorry about that.
Very well. Choose.
Okay, so let's see if this is still the same way. Yeah, so you can choose from this set of possible companions, but you have to play with this companion. Like, it has to be this lady with this hairstyle, with this race. With this name, why? One of the things I wanted to do after finishing my first playthrough was create a party of tiny people. So I wanted, like, for example, multiple Sverfneblins. I wanted, like, possibly a Duergar in the mix. So a party of all tiny people, and the game doesn't let me do what I want. I actually had to use some weird tricks with multiplayer to create the characters, bring them into the game, but then that gets messed up with cinematics. It's just a mess. I wish we were able to create our own characters the way we want to create them instead of using those dumb hirelings. Something else to note, again, about companions. I dislike the fact that it's very samey. So you get the choice from Lae'zel, Shadowheart. Actually, let me go back. So we can choose Will, human. We can choose Lae'zel, which is a Githyanki, but kind of looks like an elf. This will be relevant in a bit. We have Shadowheart, which is a half-elf. We have Asterion, half-elf. We have Gale, human. We have Karlach, tiefling. Again, very humanoid-looking aspect, but okay, it's a tiefling. We have Alcin, human. Minsk, human. Jaheira, half-elf. Mintara, drow, which is basically an elf. So, there's no variety. If there's something I love in these games is playing with short people. Why? I don't know why, but it's just something I like. I like having dwarves in my party. There's something about having a cleric dwarf that just makes it feel right. There are no dwarf companions. There's no gnome companions. There's no Duergars, Sverfneblins. There are no halflings. There's no tiny people to bring into your party. Every single companion is very human looking. That's a problem for me. Why not have more variety? It upsets me. More topics. Okay, another big topic that I remember that I want to talk about, and this is a big one, is discussing playing as good versus playing as evil. So, something that this game does very well is that it has a lot of interesting content if you are playing as good or if you are playing as evil. A very common issue with RPGs, basically from ever since video games started coming out, or RPGs started coming out, is that most games are meant to be played as a good character. You do have evil dialogue choices and evil decisions, but it really feels like the game was made to be played as good. Why do I say this? Because a lot of the times when you meet companions or NPCs or whatnot, people giving you quests, if you go to a city, most things are lined up for you being good. Your evil options are usually, you have a grandma saying, oh, here's a quest, go rescue my granddaughter that fell in the well or whatever. And if you are playing as good, you would accept the quest, you would go on a quest, maybe kill some enemies or whatever, save the child, bring her back to the grandmother, receive some kind of experience reward, maybe an item reward or whatever. And this could even branch out into, you know, later interactions with this character down the line in the game. And the evil option would just be, no bitch, I'm just gonna kill you instead, and you kill the grandma. And that's it. You failed the quest, you got no experience, you got no quest reward, and you are missing out on any future quests related to that family, for example. In Baldur's Gate 3, I do think that it has more depth than that, a lot more depth than that. At the same time, I do still feel like it's not entirely well done. So, a very quick example here on this is the deep gnome that you meet in Act 1 tied to the windmill. You can be evil, and instead of rescuing him, you just throw him through the air and kill him. And this basically means you are missing out on an entire quest line related to that guy. Okay? So that is called Barcus, I think? So you basically miss out on an entire quest line. If you play as evil and you kill the Druid Grove on Act 1, you are going to be killing Thieflings, which would give you quests in Act 2 and in Act 3. Again, this is kind of a big deal for me. It would be balanced out if you would also get quests from evil people that you don't usually get in a good playthrough, but you don't really have that. Something else that bothered me a lot playing as evil is especially when you begin or when you start progressing in Act 2. Because if you play as good, and again, I'm trying not to spoil too much here. If you play as good as you saw in my playthrough, you eventually reach a point where you kill an enemy, you pick up a lantern, and you free the pixie inside that basically gives you a buff that means you can freely move around the Shadowlands without having to worry about the Shadow Curse at all. Okay, that's a huge quality of life improvement there. If you play as evil, again, without spoiling, you don't get this option. So the only option you have is actually carrying around a lantern for the entire time. And that's massively horrible. Because not only do you have to have the lantern in one of your hands, which means that a shield you were carrying or a weapon you were carrying, now you have to replace for a lantern. You have to keep it with you at all times, and the lantern has a range. So while the pixie buff is applied to every single character and they can all move wherever they want, and they're not affected by the curse, with the lantern you actually have to keep people in a given range. So for example, if I were here, probably Mins could still be covered, but if I came over here, Mins could start getting affected by the Shadow Curse. And that's just horrible, horrible, horrible. It's so bad, I don't even have the words in English to describe it as I would like to. It honestly, it came to a point when I saw that, when I understood that I would have to carry the lantern the entire time, I nearly quit that playthrough. I basically almost abandoned the evil playthrough because of that. It's a good thing that I didn't, because I will say that the ending of an evil character is actually quite cool. And I was also playing as the Dark Urge, so extra points for being evil there. I really enjoyed the ending. Again, not gonna spoil it, but it was really cool. But along the way, there was just so much bad gameplay-wise. So another example, when you reach the Last Light Inn, the obvious good option or the good approach is to save Isabel, right? She's on the balcony, the other guy comes in to take her to Ketheric, and you save her. That's being good, pretty obvious. What would be the evil approach? The evil approach would be, okay, let's kidnap this bitch and see if Ketheric wants to make an alliance with us and give us power in exchange for whatever, right? And essentially what happens is, if you decide to be evil, and I guess this isn't much of a spoiler, you let him take Isabel, but that basically means that then the entire inn is corrupted by the Shadow Curse, and you have to kill every single person at the inn. So you are killing quest givers, you are killing merchants, you are losing out on so much by doing that it just doesn't make any sense at all to me. So yeah, I hated a lot of what the evil route had to offer. Thankfully, by the end, I do think that there was a lot of good stuff as well. Maybe it was just because it was related to playing as an evil Dark Urge. I'm not sure how the evil ending would play out if I was just like an evil will or something. But I do think that the Dark Urge ending was really cool. in terms of character builds, I think that the game, having the amount of classes that it has and the subclasses and whatnot with the level ups, I think there is room for a lot of variety in different playthroughs. I think you can customize your characters to a point where you can always have a playthrough that has you know, a different gameplay feeling from the previous one. Just by picking a different class, you are gonna have that experience, and if you start multi-classing, even more so. So that's a big plus for the game, and you know, just for CRPGs, Dungeons and Dragons in general, I think it's a very cool thing. I will say though that, at least to me, after playing for a few times, it really feels like the game seems to have a lot more variety than it actually has. Now, the variety is still there, but when you start understanding what works and what doesn't, and what's effective and what isn't, you are going to start to discard multiple classes as, you know, as proper choices or as useful choices. As an example, I looked over thief classes, okay, or rogue classes, and essentially it seems like some of them are borderline useless. There's one that I even forget the name.
Could come in handy.
I guess I can go over here just so we can talk a little bit about builds and whatnot. And I'll just respec Will. But there are certainly some classes that I look at and feel like, okay, this is just worthless.
No.
Oh my god, did I drop the money again? Give me the money.
Fate dost thou require an as the
Okay, so let's see. As an example here, if you are playing as a rogue, you get a specialization here. Not yet. Okay, the subclass. So you have the thief subclass, you have arcane trickster, and you have assassin. So to me, and again, I'm not going to go over all the classes, this is just as an example. I look at the thief class and I see that I get an additional bonus action and I get second story work. Second story work I don't really care about, it's kind of whatever. But I look at fast hands and the fact that I gain an additional bonus action, and I can very easily see that this has potential. It has potential for a thief, it has potential for a fighter, it has potential for a monk. For a monk it has a huge potential. It has potential to empower various builds. Okay? If I look, for example, at assassin, and you know, people, especially, you know, players playing a game like this, they look at assassin and it's a very standout kind of name. I look at assassin and I'm like, ooh, this is something I want to play. An assassin character, like stealthy and sneaky and very high damaging. And you think, oh, this is probably very cool. And you look at this and you are deadliest against unprepared enemies. Wow, that sounds really nice. In combat you have advantage on attack rolls against creatures that haven't taken a turn yet. That's crap. That sucks. What's the point of this? You have advantage on attack rolls against people that haven't taken a turn yet. Okay, so if you fail on the initiative, you're screwed. It's only relevant for your first action in the game or in the fight. Then it loses all of its benefits, and there's a number of other options to get advantage. So why need this? Is just bad. Ambush. Attack roll against surprise creatures at a critical hit. So sure, if you're fighting a pack of goblins and you surprise them, that's cool, I guess. You get to kill 1 or 2 goblins with a critical hit when the fight starts. But do you really need that? Because the place where this could potentially be useful would be against, I don't know, boss enemies, single very powerful enemies that you want to dispatch as soon as possible. But all of the really powerful enemies are immune to ambush. So this doesn't do anything, essentially. And again, alacrity, quick as an alley cat. You restore your action, bonus action at the start of combat. I think this is like if you use something from stealth to ambush, you regain it. Again, you get some very meaningless advantages for your first action in an entire combat, and that's it. You basically don't get anything else from the assassin. So I can very easily look at the thief and see, okay, extra bonus action, tremendously useful. Assassin, what do I have? This crap. Okay, so sure, I could play as an assassin. There's the variety of playing the assassin subclass, but will I ever pick this? And the answer I found myself in most times is no, I won't pick this. Arcane Trickster, you get a rogue that has some watered down mage spells. To me, this feels just weak. If I want mage spells, I would take a mage. Or maybe I would multi-class into a mage. I won't pick this. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I just find not very interesting. The cleric, for instance, if I look at the subdomains, here we actually have some more options for builds. Like the war domain can very clearly give you potential for a more fightery cleric. The Tempest domain can do some very powerful things if you combine it, for example, with a sorcerer using lightning spells and abusing certain items. But overall, for the role of a traditional cleric, nothing beats the life domain. It has the best domain spells. It has the best feature for support. So if I need a support character in my party, especially if I want a cleric, I'm always going to take life domain. And you know, there's a bunch of other options here. You can look at the monk, for instance. You have a couple of different options that are cool, but in my mind, nothing really beats the subclass that gives you the option to like topple people with your fists. Because you also have like one that has shadow magic and one that has elemental magic. I seriously don't think those are worth it. Or at least they don't compare to the physical part of the monk. Now again, this might just be 5th edition. It might not be something related to Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. But I do think that some of these classes and subclasses could deserve a little bit more love or a little bit more balancing to become more useful. Because sometimes it may seem like you have endless possibilities and endless builds, but then it turns out that not really. You have a couple that are, you know, really, really good, and then you have others that you can take just because you really want to take them, but you are acknowledging that you are playing with something that's never going to be as good as other options. Replayability, because I guess it also ties in with this topic of multi-classing and the available classes. I think that this game has the potential for being replayed a couple of times. I like the fact that I can play it online with my friends, and the multiplayer was actually surprisingly well done. I didn't find a lot of problems, bugs and whatnot. It for the most part, it played out quite well. And I think that even in single player you have replayability with the game, because again, you get to play as good, as evil, you get to play with different classes, different builds. You know, that's all part of being a CRPG. But I do think that I can't really put my finger down on what it is. Part of me will say that it's because it's turn-based, but at the same time I've replayed Divinity Original Sin 2 a bunch of times and I've always loved it. And it's always felt fresher than this one. I don't know if it's because of the companions, but essentially when I'm replaying this game, it feels like every single fight is, you know, it's the same thing. It doesn't really vary that much. But again, this is something that I wish I had better words to explain, but if I pick up Baldur's Gate 1 or Baldur's Gate 2, I know that if I'm going to replay it, I'm going to be facing a lot of different challenges with a lot of different classes, because some are very strong at certain things but weak at others, and it just gives a fresh gameplay feel to the game. If I go into the Pathfinder games, that's even more true, because there you really have like tremendous variety in terms of builds and multi-classing and approaches to fights. So it always feels very, very engaging. And it also always feels, I don't know, fresher, better. I can't really explain it. Maybe it's because since it's real time, things flow faster, and as such, I feel like I'm having more fun through. Even while I'm playing the same encounters as I played before, they always feel fun because they're very fast-paced and very action-oriented. It just plays out very well. In this one, the multiple playthroughs that I didn't really feel that. So essentially, if I'm replaying this game, if I were to start up a new playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3 right now, I can tell you right now what I was gonna do. I would just play the first act, going for the different fights that we have, the important ones. And Act 1 is actually the one that plays out the better in every single scenario. But once I'm done with Act 1, I'm going to go into Act 2, and in Act 2, the only thing I'm interested in is fighting the Thorns, because I enjoy all of those fights. Okay, so the lady, the Toll Keeper, the Brewer, and the Surgeon. All of those are really cool. And then fighting Ketheric Thorm at the end with the Avatar of Merkel. Everything else about Act 2, to me, the faster I can get through it, the better, because it doesn't interest me in the slightest for the most part. And again, I'm talking about replaying. On a first playthrough, the act is cool. And then on Act 3, what I do is literally, I go into Act 3, I go probably into the Elfsong Tavern, do the quest downstairs. I do the quest at Sorcerer's Sundries to get the overpowered items for mages. And then I essentially just go for Orin and Gortash, and then finish the game. That's it. So in Act 1, I still do a lot of content while replaying the game. In Act 2, I beeline for the mini boss fights and the final boss fight, because nothing else in the area really appeals to me. And then in Act 3, I basically just ignore everything. Oh, I forgot, I also killed the dragon, because I also like killing the dragon. So I just go for the boss fights, because all of the other fights just seem very uninteresting. Maybe it's related to the fact that it's turn-based, maybe it's related to the fact that it's not very difficult, because again, the game is very easy, especially if you are playing it, you know, with more knowledge as before, because as we've seen, my initial blind playthrough with zero metagaming knowledge, playing the story characters, keeping them as pure classes on their own class. Like for example, I'm playing with Shadowheart, and she is a Trickery Domain Cleric. If I were to replay the game, I would never take a Trickery Domain Cleric with me. I don't see the point at all. So something that would have made this entire run a whole lot easier would just be to swap her to a Life Cleric, for example. So the game is very easy, and I think that also detracts from the enjoyment of replaying the game, because if I already know that I'm gonna have a bunch of fights that present no challenge at all, I guess it's not very engaging, right? Again, just want to emphasize this, that for a first playthrough, I think that the game is awesome, it's really, really good, but I think it starts to lose some of its value in, you know, subsequent playthroughs, which is something that honestly I don't feel in the originals or, for example, Pathfinder. And that's something that I miss in this game, because I feel like every time I'm playing Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 again, I enjoy it more, because I bring more knowledge to the table. I can tune my build in a different way, or pick different spells, or pick different party members, and just have a, I don't know, just beat the challenges in a more efficient way. In Pathfinder, the same thing. I can tune up a different build, change up my companions or whatever, and it feels like every subsequent run with more knowledge is even more enjoyable. While here, it's the other way around. It feels like every time I'm playing the game, I'm getting less enjoyment. So yeah, like I said, I've played the game a bunch of times, not a bunch of times, like 3 times maybe, and honestly, I have absolutely no plans to play this game again unless something major comes out. Like if they bring out a new difficulty setting that revamps the entire difficulty of the game and the AI of the enemies, or if a mod comes out like Sword Coast Stratagems for Baldur's Gate 3, that would make me replay the game. Other than that, I don't really see myself playing it again. Okay, so another big positive on Baldur's Gate 3, and this is, I know this is kind of like an unstructured review of just random topics, but these are the things that I remember the most about the game, the ones that have marked me the most, so I think it's important to discuss them. And I think that this game has several specific moments where it excels. Like, for instance, I think that Raphael, the character as a whole, every single time he appears in the game is well done. I think that NPC is awesome. The way he talks, his mannerisms, the way he presents himself, the entire quest line, up to the point where you fight the guy in his house in hell with his own soundtrack that he himself is singing. That's awesome. The fact that the guy has 666 hit points, awesome touch. The music, excellent. The way that he transforms into like a demonic being, perfect. I think that was really excellently done. Amazing character the entire game that, you know, ends in an amazing final boss fight. That was one of my favorite, if not my favorite things about this game. I also think that the part where you meet the Night Song at the bottom of the mausoleum and you fight Balthazar is also an excellent encounter. I think the encounter is really cool. I think the build-up for that encounter and for the whole Night Song topic is awesome. You know, starts off as being something mystical, you think it's an object, eventually you discover it's a source of weakness for Ketheric, and then you find out it's just a person, in this case a daughter of Selûne, that's trapped by an evil necromancer, and you fight him, and then you can free her, and the whole cinematic sequence of her becoming free, and you know, that Sailor Moon sequence where she gets the armor and her sword with the music. It's so well done. I don't know what you call that. Is it post-production? Is it cinematic? I don't know. I don't know where to attribute, you know, props here. I don't know who I should say did an awesome job, but those things are amazing. I think the fight with Ketheric Thorm at the Mind Flayer colony, where you fight him, and then the Apostle of Merkel shows up, that was amazing. It's kind of a shame to me, honestly, that for Gortash and for Orin, it doesn't play out quite the same way. I think Orin becoming the Slayer with the whole theme of Baal in that sacrificial pit is still very good, but none really came close to the Apostle of Merkel. And maybe that's also related to expectations, because when I first saw the Ketheric fight in the playthrough in the channel, I wasn't really expecting what happened. And when the Apostle of Merkel showed up, you know, that gigantic being, that monster, threatening looking, it was an amazing moment. That was excellent. And at that point, I was like, oh my god, okay, so if this guy is presenting himself like this, and the fight plays out like this, what can I expect for the other two, which are, you know, even more powerful? And I mean, it turned out that I went to Gortash and he died like a little bitch. I know that he also has a more convoluted fight, because in my evil playthrough I didn't clean up the factory, so I had to fight him along with several constructs, and the guy has the aspects of Bane and whatnot. But it's still not quite as spectacular as Merkel, and the same thing for Orin. But yeah, I also think that the game ends in a very good way. I think the quest, the entire main quest has a nice ending, and you know, I think overall the story is well written. I feel like the game has very, very awesome points, and I feel like some others were not so good. Okay, so a lot of random thoughts and comments in this review, but I think I touched on the things that I felt were more important and that stood out to me the most throughout the entire game. So, as a conclusion, I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is an amazing game. And I've said this before for the early access review. Sometimes I may be, or I may sound very critical of the game. I'm constantly pointing out issues and problems and things I would like to see improved. But that doesn't mean I don't like the game. I like the game a lot. And the fact that I have so much criticism, I think, goes to show that it was an important game to me, and I liked it a lot, and I would like it to see even better. And usually, if I talk more about the things that I find wrong, instead of talking about the good, is because a lot of times I have some difficulty in saying, you know, more than they did this well. Okay, certain things I can explain why I feel like they did it very well, or why it was, you know, particularly good or awesome. But for the most part, I don't really develop what was done good that much, because I also want it to change. I think it's good the way it is, so there's not really much more to discuss. But yeah, if I sound critical, that's why. Overall, still, I think that this game is an amazing game. I think that in terms of RPGs, it's probably one of the more complete, you know, more content, more decisions available in a game that's come out in recent years. I think it's a game that's very good for people who have never played Dungeons and Dragons before or CRPGs before, and they just want to, you know, check this out. I think it's not overwhelming for someone that's new. I think it can introduce people very well to Dungeons and Dragons and this kind of game, while also being enjoyable for people that already have prior knowledge. Like most of these games, I think there's a lot of value to having a game based on Dungeons and Dragons, and having a game where you have so many choices, so many interactions, so many character build options, because there is a lot there. You can spend a lot of time theory crafting different builds, multi-classing different classes, and, you know, playing it out and seeing how they perform. You know, I do this and I love this, so there's a lot of good here. I believe that the story is very good. I think that the only thing I could point out to the story, besides the pacing issues I've mentioned before, is that it might start off a little bit too epic. And what I mean by this is, like in Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2, I could use other examples, but yeah. You don't see a mind flayer until you are very powerful, until much later in the game, right? And here, you start off the game interacting with mind flayers and fighting besides mind flayers, and that may feel a little bit strange. Sure, they went a different route with this game, not the whole humble origins killing boars in the fields, but it may feel a little bit strange to start off in such an epic level. I also appreciate a lot the way that they added different ways of solving different problems, and I'm not talking only about dialogue decisions or exploration, because those are nice, obviously. In exploration I didn't mention, but yeah, the fact that you can go through the front door of a building or try to look for an entrance on the roof, or maybe a hidden wall that's crumbly on the side, or transform yourself into a gnome to enter through the air ducts, that's really cool. But also in terms of combat, especially on certain fights, and I think the more noticeable ones are the ones in Act 2 with the Thorms, the fact that you can kill them without even fighting, I think it's really interesting. I think having a lot of different approaches to solving conflicts is a good way of doing a game such as this. I think that the companion quests are well done. I felt like I didn't really feel like any of them were boring or ended in a stupid way. I do feel what I've said before. I think it's a little bit overdone, the thing that everybody has a connection with, a direct connection to the gods. Something that should be very rare, every single one has it, which is a little bit strange. But other than that, the quests were always cool. I think they overdo it a little bit sometimes with the romance. Like, for example, Gale would not let me go, man. I told him no like 30 times and he just kept coming. And at the same time, I think certain companions also surprised me. Because when I started playing the game in the early access, I did not like Lae'zel at all. I did not like that character at all. I didn't like Astarion. Well, that one I still don't like. I didn't like Shadowheart. And, well, nowadays I love Lae'zel. I think she's one of the better characters, one of the better companions. I do like Shadowheart, especially the way that her quest evolves and how it turns out. So I think that the companions are also well done in the depth that they bring to the game. I also think, talking about romance, that Larian overdid it a bit with the whole inclusion thing in the game. I have no problems with any kind of races or sexual choices or whatnot. It's all fine to me. But when you have a game where, and I'm trying really hard here. I am trying really hard here. I don't think I remember a single relationship in this game that involves a straight couple. Maybe there are. I'm not trying to be mean, but I just don't remember it. I have a poor memory, but I remember a lot of same-sex couples. And, I mean, come on, it gets to a point where it really feels like they're trying to force something on me, on the player, and I'm just done with that. Just please take that out of the game. Other than that, I said what I had to say about replayability. I think there's a lot of good for replayability, but I think there's more of an illusion of a lot of replayability than actual, the actual real replayability. I think that, again, I'm gonna go with this point. If you are coming from the originals to play this game, you have to manage your expectations. This is not the same thing as Baldur's Gate 1 or Baldur's Gate 2. It's a very different game, but it is a very good game in its own style. So yeah, I think I have discussed what I want to discuss. I have probably missed out a couple of topics, something that I may remember later that I wanted to include, but Well, I think the most important points I've covered. Really awesome game. I wish I wanted to play it more. I don't know if it makes sense, but yeah, that's something that I wanted. I wish I wanted to play it more. Very, very good game. Very, very easy game to recommend to anyone wanting to play this game. I think there's a lot of good. So yeah, as usual, like I said, there's probably very different topics that I didn't cover. If there's something that you want to know specifically that I did not cover here, or if you want a more in-depth discussion of some point that I did cover here, leave a comment and I would love to discuss it with you guys. And you know, if something that I forgot, feel free to mention it as well. And as usual, if you are just checking out this review, we have the entire playthrough in the channel as well. Played with Will as our protagonist, as a good playthrough. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing for more. There will be more videos coming out. I'm probably going to do another video for Baldur's Gate 3 to kind of like recommend a party lineup with several builds, or at least just, you know, just main roles and main classes, because that's something that a lot of people usually ask me. But yeah, stay tuned for the next playthroughs coming up. I believe they are going to be probably Pathfinder and Rogue Trader, which is coming out on, you know, on December 7th. And as always, you know, anything you guys want to talk about, leave a comment. If you enjoy it, subscribe for more, and I hope to see you all in another video. Until then, stay safe, everyone.